Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Consumed by Grace podcast for a little special 2, maybe 3-part thing that we're going to do. We'll kind of see how the conversation goes. We are your hosts for this episode. I am Pastor Henry here at Arab First UMC, and today we have a very special guest with us, one of our members, Matt Bishop. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everybody a little bit about who you are before I introduce our theme.
Sure. My name is Matt Bishop. I am married to Kayla Bishop, and I have a son named Sam, who is also known as Moose. Mm-hmm. You have to know him as Moose, or he might not talk to you.
That is a true story.
I have been attending here for a little over a year. I have a rich and varied history as far as backgrounds in different denominations and different movements and stuff like that. And I currently am trying to make it my full-time job that I am a therapist. I'm a therapist in Coleman, at Coleman Family Counseling, and I specialize in religious trauma. So,
thanks, Matt. We're so glad that you will be here. Thanks, Brooke will be back with us on the next episode. We just had a schedule conflict, and it's like, you know what? We actually landed on a date. Let's keep that. There may even be an intro to this that Brooke and I said we were going to record and just hadn't had time to yet. So who knows? There could be. We might even lead with even more silliness than we normally do in this space. But particularly why we wanted Matt to come on here with what we're going to do. There's a word, a phrase, a concept that keeps coming up time and time again in our world, particularly in the religious world now, and there's a lot of random ways that people use that word, and a lot of random ways that people understand that word, so much so it gets thrown around, and I don't know that everybody knows what that word means. Which, of course, if you have any cultural sensibility whatsoever, you should go to The Princess Bride. You should go to Vicini saying inconceivable, and you should hear Indigo Montoya say, "You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means."
Yes. Yes.
And you killed my father. Not to carry it. Okay, moving on.
Man with 6 fingers.
Gotta love The Princess Bride. But that word for us is deconstruction. That more and more, at least that I find in not just church world articles and things from Relevant Magazine, other words, but that gets thrown around a lot.
Sure.
And we do see it, and some people love it, some people don't. You hear about people who are evangelicals and now they're ex-evangelicals, and deconstruction is why. And some people say it's a path to freedom, and some people say it's the bane of existence of the church, and they don't know what to do about it. So much, I think the thing, and this was even said a while back, and I just missed it when it first came out, but the front man of a band who I grew up loving and listening to quite a bit, Skillet, their front man John Cooper said, and I wanted to actually have the quote in front of me so I would say it right.
You're getting out reading classes.
No, gosh. Thankfully, still Thank you, still just contacts when I don't have on my regular glasses.
Here we go.
But
looking scholarly. Here we go.
But he said, "It is time that we declare war against this deconstruction Christian movement. I don't even like calling deconstruction Christian. There's nothing Christian about it. It is a false religion." And in my opinion, I think you use that word, I don't think you actually know what it means. Yeah. Again, in my opinion. And so I wanted to talk about that. And Matt, as part of this, give a little bit of your education background, because I think that might help people.
Sure. I started college back in the late 1900s. Mm-hmm.
When I was that just hurts.
It was black and white then. There were covered wagons. Mm-hmm. It was weird. But When I was there, I went to a small Mississippi school called Dal State University. And when I was there, I fell into the psychology program because I've always been interested in helping people but don't like the sight of blood. So that has always what I've been into. I pass out. It's bad. But I also, while I was there, you had to pick a minor. And when I was at the university, I fell in love with philosophy. That was my jam, and I didn't care that if you could never get a job with philosophy except to teach philosophy. I didn't care. It was the best. It was the thing that made me read. It was the thing that made me think. And my professor, Dr. William Pennington, he was an old Presbyterian minister. He drove a Model T to work. He was one of those guys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I think that may have been the original Model T that he owned. Because he was but he was the coolest guy and really invested in me because I was the only kid on campus that was willing to invest back. And so I did a lot of philosophy after I finished school. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with myself, but I had always been involved in Southern Baptist churches, and I had always been involved in youth groups, college programs, and taking kids to camps and being at centrifuge camps, and that's a throwback for you. You're welcome, guys. And I at that point decided that I wanted to go to seminary. I wanted to learn how to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got there, but I did know that this was something that really interests me, and I wanted to get into it. I went to not a Southern Baptist school, but a offshoot of a Southern Baptist school. I fell in love with the place. I fell in love with the people there. I fell in love with what they were actually dealing with on a daily basis. I felt like it was smart. I felt like it was like really good stuff. And so I finished with my master's degree. I was a youth pastor at a church in Memphis. And when I finished my master's degree, I went into a PhD program, and that's kind of where the trouble began. Because when you get to that level, they kind of teach you that it's time to think. And it's time to read, and they can steer you away from things that you might not necessarily want to read, but you're going to have to eventually, right? And so at that level, I began to read a lot of things that were kind of contrary to my experience that I had had before, academically and in like local practice. I didn't finish my PhD. You don't have to call me doctor. Please don't. But I got sick at the time, and so I had to pull out of that. Eventually, then so culturally too, during that time, I got divorced during that time and had to pull away from the school almost entirely. And so at that point, I had kind of lost my job. I had lost my education that I wasn't necessarily even using. I got into therapy because it was probably the thing that I probably should have gone into in the first place. But sometimes you learn lessons in your 20s, and sometimes you learn lessons in your 30s.
Sure.
And so that was the lesson that I learned in my 30s. And while I was working on that degree, I fell in love with a wonderful lady named Michelle, and Michelle got ill pretty soon after our son was born. She's Sam's mom, and she got ill, and so I remember on December 3rd. This is more personal information than you actually wanted to know. But on December 3rd of 2015...
It's part of the process.
That's right, it is part of the process. December 3rd of 2015, she called me at work and said, I need you to come home and take care of Sam and me, because it's at the place where I can't take care of myself anymore, and I need you to help. And I didn't know if it was going to be for 2 weeks or 2 months, and it turned out it ended up being 6.5 years. During that 6.5 years, I would say that I went through a process that was very much that would be deconstruction during that time period. I read a lot of things that people told you ought not read. I discovered themes that I was interested in and began to expand. And basically my major theme of deconstruction would be that all of my education and all of my experience made Christianity to be a very small boat. Right? And everything that I read said, it's not a small boat. It's a big boat. And it's a big boat that we can actually all fit in. And we don't have to go, you got to get your own boat. Like, this is a boat that we all can actually fit in if we would just if we would learn to deal with people in a different way, and if we would learn to be more empathetic, and we would learn to do all these things kind of differently.
Dare I say, to maybe take that boat and change it just a little bit so I can get the appropriate song reference. You might say that it's a big, big house with lots and lots of room. One could say that.
I was looking last night at a T-shirt that I should have worn to this, which was one that said, "I survived youth ministry in the 90s." and so that fits right.
Audio
in that.
A would have been a
me right
big
back
part
to
of
that.
that.
Like, I'm right there.
Yes.
Like, all over again.
But no, Matt, I appreciate you sharing all of that, because I think that puts into perspective why I feel like we need to talk about this. Is because a lot of things happen in and around deconstruction, and it can look very differently. And for some people, especially if you haven't done it, or if you don't know anybody personally who's gone through something, then they termed it that. It's this big boogeyman over here. Mm-hmm. This puts flesh on it.
Sure.
And I think makes it something that in some cases it's going to be, okay, I get that. I can see that academically. Other people you might find yourself listening to this and thinking, oh, that's where I am. Or, oh, that's what that was when that was happening. Right. And what I want to say is, and that's okay. To me, I think that's okay. To me, I think that can be a blessing. I think we need some help with that, and we're just going to talk about different things and different sources that might end up being guides for you in that. But that's getting around. So what kind of we're going to do, as I say, this could end up being 2 episodes and maybe end up being 3, is today we're going to talk mostly about more of the academic side of things. Where did this idea come from?
The nerdiest episode you might have ever had.
This is going to be pretty close. Some of our
I don't know.
We did get it. We did multiple times use the word hermeneutics in a podcast episode.
Okay, I remember those.
So
I remember those. Okay.
This will be pretty close. Just more maybe on the philosophical side than the
theological side.
For if you know, I will reference Heidegger at least once. Because he laid the foundation for a lot of this.
Spell Heidegger.
No, I can because his name is actually in my notes in somewhere.
Notes. Perfect.
Although Heidegger's the easy one, Kierkegaard. That is one that will throw you for a loop.
And that slash through will get you. Whatever that is. Yes. I don't know what that is. I wish I did.
Anytime you have double vowels and they're not E's, it's trouble.
And he would be good humored about it being Dutch.
Oh,
he would just be like, that is funny.
That's very funny. Anyway, so that's kind of what we're going to do this episode, and then next episode we're going to talk a little bit more about where we see that in our own personal stories.
Sure.
And what I'm hoping will happen is for some of us, maybe that'll take a little bit of the fear away from this big boogeyman of a term. So that's our goal, and we're glad to have you here walking through this with us. So I'm going to just start, and in a moment of complete transparency, a lot of this stuff, as I was looking through different sources, I'm like, okay, that's good. You know what? Let's go baseline here. Thank you, Wikipedia. Every now and again, just good old Wikipedia is a good way to get as I say, a baseline definition for this, because it is written for the average person to read.
Kids, if you're listening, don't use it for your research.
This is not academic research.
Don't do that.
Now
AI either.
Don't use the AI. Now I tell you what, you can use Wikipedia for is look at their sources.
Yes, that's the secret. They should teach you that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's down at the bottom.
So what we've got here is, in philosophy, deconstruction is a loosely defined set of approaches to understand the relationship between text and meaning. And in some cases, people would even extend that a little bit to language and meaning, not just text, but language. So again, that's why the Princess Bride, you keep using that word. Does it mean what you think it means?
Sure.
Like that's fun, it's silly, but that's also kind of deep. Yeah. I think because how often do we run that? You say a word, I say a word. Are we meaning the same thing by that?
Sure.
The most famous example, if you are from the South, if you're from the South, you know this intimately. If you're not from the South, you've probably heard it and been a little bit confused by it. There are great videos to watch about it. What does someone mean when they say, "Bless your heart"?
Oh, that's a good one. Context matters, kids.
Context matters. Context matters. Verbal placement matters. Inflection matters.
Yep.
Sometimes "bless your heart" is an expression of empathy.
Yeah.
Sometimes "bless your heart" is a statement of your stupidity.
Yes.
Sometimes "bless your heart" is "ha ha, look at you." Sometimes "bless your heart" is, "Oh, did you see what she did?"
Did you ask her to make dressing at the potluck? Oh, bless your heart.
"Bless your heart" has a broad definition. Deconstruction was introduced by the philosopher Jacques Derrida, or Derrida, depending on who you are.
Ask his mom.
Who was trying to move away from the idea, in his sense, true forms and essences which are valued above appearances. So, Mr. Philosopher, when you hear true forms and essences which are valued above appearances, what does that mean in lay terms?
So, very simply, Derrida would say that the text is all there is. Like, there's meaning to the text, but only in the sense that the words have meaning, or that the culture has put meaning into the words, instead of there being a larger form, Platonic. And we say Platonic in this field, and people automatically think relationships or Hallmark movies,
yes,
or whatever. But and when I say Platonic, I would mean Plato, and Plato would say that, and if anybody has had any basic philosophy, he would say that there are ideas and there are pure forms of ideas. Did he believe that they actually really existed somewhere? Well, he wasn't sure, but he didn't actually think that they existed anywhere but in our kind of collective conscious, as there would be. But oftentimes people think that he had, I remember from philosophy class from, 150 years ago, that they would be like that they would explain it to you this way, that Plato believed that there was the idea of a perfect chair. And Derrida would say, no, there's only chairs. And there's good chairs, and there's bad chairs, and there's uncomfortable chairs, and they're all dependent upon what you're actually being in. And so from this point of view, the deconstruction that he's talking about is that all that there is words. All that there is text. All that there is words. And all that there is encoding as to what that word means via the culture, and what that word's meaning via the privilege, and what that word means from any of those kind of areas. So, like, and this is getting thick, I know, guys. Hang on, we'll get there.
We're moving along, but you got to set the groundwork, yes. I think, to get at what this is trying to really talk about.
So, in this case, this is a very high education kind of approach. This was not something that has been an effect on, if you're a plumber, it's not really a part of your life. This is a kind of higher education approach. But it is meaningful in the sense that there were ways that it was added to different critical movements, and there were different ways that it was added to religious kind of criticism, and there was a literary criticism where it hit first and stuff like that. So we get that kind of at a basic level in our basic education. So, and then that's how it affects us kind of as time kind of moves on. So.
And I think what's significant about this, and why there's a bit of shock, and I forgot to note this, but when was Derrida writing? It was the mid-1900s?
Yes, would be the 50s and 60s.
50s and 60s. Why that's such a big deal is Plato, who, just for a little bit of a time sense, Plato, the reason we know so much about Plato is because of his student Aristotle. Aristotle, who was the tutor of Alexander the Great.
Yes.
So, if you think about the big three Greek philosophers that most of us learned, even if you didn't take philosophy, Socrates, student Plato, Aristotle, these people were all lived before Jesus was born.
Yes.
So we're talking 2,000 years that in so many ways dominated, especially Western thought, and we are products of Western thought.
And we can thank a Muslim for that.
Yes, we can.
So there we go.
Yep, because they preserve the writings. But so that is dominant. So part of the reason why I think what Derrida is talking about, and we'll get into a little bit more of that, why that's such a shock, is he is critiquing in a lot of ways the dominant thought for the last 2 millennia.
Sure.
And I think it's a necessary critique in the same way that, for a while there, you think about the what we all learned was Newtonian physics.
Sure.
And then there was Einstein.
Came up with something different.
And it didn't completely negate everything that Newton did, but it built on it in such a way. And in some ways, as those understandings eclipsed.
Yes.
Just in the same way that in the last 100 years, Einstein, for as much good as he did, now there are quantum physics that are building on what he did that is going past. And I can't. It's so much beyond me. Which, by the way, have you read? I think it's one of his newer ones, "Curveball" by Peter Enns.
Yes, I have.
He did such a good job.
Awesome. You should read Curveball. Stop listening to this and read Curveball, and then come back. Then come back.
Please come back. He did such a good way of talking about that in a lay perspective.
Yes,
because he for those of you who don't know, Peter Enns.
Man,
great writer, great podcaster, seminary professor, has a lot to say on that, and informed a lot of both of what we have come to think and try to understand about this. But he's an Old Testament scholar. He is not a scientist, so he adds some fun perspective in ways that a lot of us can pick up without fully knowing what in the world is being talked about. Somewhat similar to this. Derrida would say, as he criticized that, a lot of names you might have heard, like Soren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, Heidegger, which probably not as many if you didn't do any upper level religious studies in college and or seminary. He's building on some of the ways that they thought to read the Bible, try to understand the Bible. In some cases, so that we could better live. In other cases, because they wanted to reject what was being said, especially in Nietzsche's case. And he started taking some of their ideas and applying it just to text and language in general.
Yes.
And the way we talk about things and how meaning in so many ways can be culturally derived, which means if it's culturally derived, it can change a bit.
Yeah.
And in some cases, that means it is built upon, expanded upon. Mm-hmm. In some cases, you might say it's hijacked.
Sure.
One of the interesting thoughts says, an assertion that the texts outlive their authors and become a part of a set of cultural habits equal to, if not surpassing, the importance of the authorial intent. And I love that because the question is, and we are of the same demographic. I don't know that we've ever specifically talked about this, but I feel like just given history, you'll say something. Mm-hmm. Who owns Star Wars?
Oh, we have talked about this.
I couldn't remember.
The nerds think they own Star Wars.
Exactly. Who owns Star Wars? Is it George Lucas?
Right.
One of the big, again, this is in a very different realm of super nerdy, but If you remember when they came out with the reissues,
Yes.
in the what was that, late 90s?
Yes.
Late 90s,
Yeah.
late 1990s.
1990s.
I guess we're gonna have to start doing that. That
the
just
late
hurts
1900s.
that
It does, but it fits.
hurts my
It
soul,
fits better.
man.
Like it does, and it makes you seem like you were in a wagon train or
yes.
something. Yeah, it totally does.
Well, I mean,
but
we did play a lot of Oregon Trail,
and everything smelled like cigarette smoke. It was weird.
It did.
Man,
It did. We were explaining this to someone the other day, and again, this is something that it makes no sense to a lot of people. There were restaurants, and particularly although most of them are smoke free now, I think.
Yes.
But like Waffle House was the key.
Yes.
You had a smoking section and you had a non-smoking section.
Yes.
And what was the divider between the two?
Nothing.
There was not. The divider was air.
The divider was the sheer will of you're smoking over there.
Yes,
That's it.
You were smoking on this half. You would not have an ashtray at that half, but it was still it was still there.
My college had ashtrays in the. You couldn't smoke there, but they still had ashtrays in the chairs.
Wow.
Like you could they were full with all kinds of stuff. You didn't ever open them,
gum,
but gum and just whatever.
It seems like I do remember some older classrooms seeing that.
Sure.
And, but so Star Wars, they came out with the digital upgrades, and in some cases that was used simply to enhance the visual image.
Yes.
In other cases, it was used to change the story.
A little, yes.
The big example is who shot first?
That's right. That's right. The Han shot
because
first.
In the original, that was very much because limits of technology.
Right. It's hard to make a puppet shoot first.
Yes. They were just limited, and so they could only do so much.
Yeah.
And more that got tweaked. I think he's tweaked that at least 3 times.
Yes.
Now so much so that you can clearly see that Greedo shot first.
Greedo shoots first because
Han's
the hero.
Han moves his head. But a lot of people don't like that because yes, he's a hero.
He's like an anti-hero.
He's a rogue.
He's a bit of a
It fits in his character to shoot
that
first.
he would have shot first. Okay.
And again, but who owns the meaning of who Han is? The original author's intent. Now Marvel, now Disney, who also owns Marvel, or the fans,
right?
And all of that. That seems like a silly, again, super nerd example of that.
But it's just what philosophers do all the time. This is what they do.
It is what they do. But how many of those things also, it's in our everyday experience of life, and including how we practice our faith. I see this a lot of times in our in our faith life, because like, for instance, I'm on our conference's board of ordained ministry, and one of the things that I do as part of that is when we have new candidates to be ministers, whether they're going to be inside a church or connected to an organization specific to our United Methodist denomination, you have to write theology degrees, or theology. You have to have a master's of divinity. You have to write a perspective on that, and in our perspective, we want you to be United Methodist Wesleyan, and that is a particular train of thought.
Sure.
The word grace, the words communion and baptism, when we say those things, those mean particular things and are practiced in particular ways that are would not seem wholesale different to someone from the outside, but I can tell when someone's writing papers like, oh yeah, that's a Southern Baptist theology. Nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
It's just not United Methodist and what we're looking for.
Right.
Words and the meaning that we ascribe to them have power.
Right.
And sometimes, and this is where I think it particularly gets into our faith, is sometimes the meaning that we learn might have been localized to a particular setting, a particular time, a particular context. What if there's another meaning? What if there's a different meaning out there? And that's important to consider. Part of the problem of deconstruction and why it is so poorly defined is because Derrida poorly defined it on purpose.
Yes.
Because he wrote a lot of essays and things. And what do you have to use to write essays, write papers? Words.
And it is very hard to explain something that's just words.
And it is,
words.
and you were saying, hey, words have flexible meaning depending on context. And I'm explaining to that with
Using
words.
Yes.
So that's why this can get a little sticky or a little ooey gooey, because it is poorly defined. However, I did want to talk a little bit as we move through kind of the general thought into a little bit of what is faith deconstruction. Also known as deconstructing faith, religious deconstruction, or simply deconstruction, is a process during which religious believers re-examine and question their beliefs.
Okay. Yeah.
That is a big thing right now. We hear that more and more. As I say, there's a whole movement here in the United States. What people who consider them the evangelical wing of Christianity, of the church, is a massive movement, and it is so massive that people who have gone through what they would say is deconstruction, where they have re-examined their faith, where they have questioned their belief, they have questioned it so much that they have become what's called an ex-evangelical. They no longer believe that set of beliefs. In some cases, that leads to people leaving their local church or their particular denomination. And in some cases, that has meant people have left their faith behind, their belief in God totally. And there's a massive spectrum of that, massive spectrum of that. And you see it in a lot of different ways. I forget his name now. Josh, I Kiss Dating Goodbye guy.
Howerton.
Yeah, he has over the steps left the faith completely, and it's been very public, and who knows, because this is a process. Maybe at some point in time he might make his way back. But at my last understanding, it was I no longer believe in this. I can't get there in this way. And so that's where he at, and he's a very public figure, so that gets played out on the public scale.
Bart Ehrman.
Yeah, scholar at North Carolina.
Derek Webb from Caedmon's Call is another good example based on church's treatment of LGBTQ.
Yes,
which kind of pushed him out completely. So yeah,
but then you have people like Pastor Brian Zahnd, who is another influential author, particularly to both of us, who he didn't even stop pastoring his congregation as he went through this. Right. Now, the makeup and the style of his congregation changed wildly, but I would say the majority of his church stayed with him on that ride, which is it's a phenomenal story to read about. Yeah. But I think that is why I see so much angst around this term. Is there have been a lot of high profile people who, because they have taken the time to re-examine their beliefs, they leave the faith, and that hurts a lot of people. And in my experience, I feel there's a lot of reasons behind why there's so much angst. Your analogy about the boat, I think, is great. Yeah. Because a small boat or a small box, that's really, really easy.
Sure, it's great.
It's easy to manage.
You just run into people who agree with you all day long, and it's and
it gives
like Twitter.
Yeah,
like. I'm not calling it X. It's Twitter. I don't use it anymore. But that's what it was like. I miss
old Twitter.
Yeah, I don't.
But it's simple. It's easy. It's secure.
Yeah.
And there have been particular churches. There have even been some denominations that they have built themselves on keeping that box intact. In my mind, to think of a Bible parallel, it's a lot of. To me, it's the approach that the Pharisees took to upholding the law.
Right.
If you are willing to follow the law, you should be willing to follow our traditions, because our traditions protect the law.
Yes.
And if you don't violate our traditions, you don't violate the law.
Right.
Sometimes we've built that box on particularly what we read on the Bible. Sometimes we build it on a particular pastor or a particular group and their interpretation of things. And when we start questioning that, it can shake the foundation.
Sure.
And it makes different people involved very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that even like Paul talks about, that there are parts of our faith, they were going through that at the beginning. Mm-hmm. They were going through that in the book of Acts. They were going through, like, well, should we do this or should we do this? Mm-hmm. And then what if we do this? If we do this, what happens to this? Mm-hmm. And, Paul wrote in his letters constantly, there were references to, hey, sometimes you got to stop drinking milk and it's time for meat, mm-hmm. And sometimes we got to grow our own faith, and sometimes we've got to bolster it in the way that it becomes ours in that mm-hmm. sense. And so deconstruction feels like a process that the opponents of deconstruction will tell you that it is absolutely unbiblical, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. But my favorite example, and probably yours as well, would be the way Walter Brueggemann treats the Old Testament. Mm. He treats the Old Testament with a dialectical form of understanding, which is literally just deconstruction. Mm-hmm. You have an idea, you meet the opposite idea, mm-hmm. and you have to come up with a new idea in the center. Mm-hmm. And so this is literally the process of deconstruction. Mm-hmm. And Brueggemann is great. Oh. Just read a book. It's awesome.
I miss him.
Just stop this again. Pick up a Brueggemann book, and in 6 months, come back to it, because it'll take you that long.
May I recommend Brueggemann on the Psalms?
Oh, yes. Read the Psalms book. Read the Psalms book. It's fantastic. But there was one on the prophets, too. I can't remember which one. I love that one.
Yeah.
The one on the prophets was so good. Or was it just it was Hope. General? Was it Hope? I'll look it up. Anyway, I'll come back to it.
We'll try to make an... this is a promise that, Brooke, when you listen to this video later, you're going to have to hold us to. Yeah. We'll list some of these resources that we're talking about in the show notes.
Yes, because I can't remember the title. But it feels like it's actually part of the process, and it's what people should actually be doing as they kind of grow their faith, and as faith transitions from the faith of our parents is not the same as it is for us, because it can't be.
It's a different world.
The people are different. The culture is different. So it can't be the church of the 50s anymore, as much as some people might like it to be. It can't be.
So you mentioned this, I think, what is the best biblical example of someone going through a radical deconstruction, in a way? Again, Reconstruction being, to use this basic definition, come back, a process during which we re-examine and question their beliefs.
Okay.
And the reason I'm going to...
There's lots of good ones.
Lots of good ones, but you literally just said his name.
Was Paul. Yeah.
Paul... he was persecuting the church after, as to the law. He was a Pharisee, and he was zealous, like no one was before. It's funny. N.T. Wright has a great little paragraph in his Acts. I guess it's both in his Acts and his book on Paul, about the word zeal and the weight of that for a Jewish person. Yeah. And it called back to one of the earliest priests, Phineas, one of Aaron's grandsons.
Interesting.
And the way he was zealous for the Lord. But Paul, he was committed, and he was so committed to his understanding that he had made it his personal mission to stamp out the growing church. Yep. And then he met Jesus. Yep. And then he met a couple of believers who were helping him to learn and study. And he spent significant time searching the scriptures, and his beliefs changed. Yep. If you study the scriptures with new information and your interpretation of things begins to change, you might just be finding yourself in the company with Paul.
Yeah. I mean, that's not necessarily a terrible place to be at.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
And I think, this is one of the things that has happened to me over the course of my life and my journey, and it continues to happen. You know, you meet people who have different life experiences, who have different perspectives, which add flavor, and to me add a chance at a more full understanding at what the text is saying.
Sure.
Because I had this blind spot here that I couldn't see until I met so-and-so who said, well, have you ever thought about this? Well, no, I hadn't. I don't think it's our job to say, well, gosh, I don't, just because I haven't thought of that makes that illegitimate.
Fabulous example of this is the first book that made me kind of reevaluate kind of this thing was a Brian Zahnd book. It was A Farewell to Mars, which was the first one. Brian Zahnd is probably maybe one of the more famous I suddenly just lost the word. Anti-war. Literally conscientious objector kind of stuff. And I had always had that kind of feeling because I had understood, some things that were from the Bible, and I had, and I always understood that, but my culture and my church and the theology of that place did not have that that teaching in that sense. And so finally, as I'm reading this book, I'm like, there's a guy that built a whole theology based around I'm anti-war. I am about peace above all. I don't think there is such a thing as a just war. I think we should avoid it at all costs. And to me, that was a blind spot that had kind of opened. I was already kind of interested in it, but I never thought that you could build an entire perspective around it. And to me, that opened up tons of categories of things that I suddenly were like, okay, I think these things are moral, and I think that these things are moral imperatives, like Kant would say. I think that these things are moral imperatives, but they don't exactly fit. How do we do this?
Yes.
And so that's where deconstruction can come in and go, okay, then we'll make it fit. And the words have the words of the meaning, and they mean stuff. There's a different meaning in the original and in the cultural text. And that's okay that there is.
Yeah. And as we talk about different things, as I say, there are different people who, when they hear about this, they get a little bit scared.
Oh, yeah.
And in a sense, we have to be careful we do that. But I also think that's okay. Yeah. And why that's okay is because, yes, this can be scary. When you have a deeply held belief and you come to a place where whatever you've learned, what you've experienced, something that has happened, this is what this book by Peter Enns is all about. When a curveball of life gets thrown your way and you have to now figure out, what does my faith mean? What does this belief mean in light of this? It can be scary. It can be overwhelming. So I want to say I get that, because it can it can cause a loss of friendships. It can cause a change in your faith community. What I do also want to say is what has been my experience, what has been the experience of a ton of people, is there is hope in the midst of that.
Oh, yeah.
There is so much goodness that can come of that. And as the song reference that Brooke and I make very, very frequently, and shout out to Aaron Howard, a friend from a previous congregation, it can lead you to find your people.
Ooh.
And that can be such a blessing in the midst of all of that. Drew Holcomb, Ellie Holcomb, Neighbors, love them.
Dig that.
Yeah, good music, because there's always music.
Yeah.
I think there can be hope in that. I think it's important. This is something that Brooke, I think, emphasizes almost every podcast. In our podcasts and our sermons and in our studies that we do, we're reading this, we're being influenced by people who influence us, and we have a particular lens of reading. But y'all read and look it up for yourselves, because you might see something different than I do, than Matt does. Just because someone says it from a pulpit, just because someone says it behind a microphone, does not make it automatically right in gospel truth.
Like a couple of weeks ago, you did that thing about Chris Gaines, and I had to correct you immediately after the sermon. Like, you had the text waiting on you on the way. I had to correct you immediately.
For those of you who don't know who Chris Gaines is, Chris Gaines is Garth Brooks' alter ego. When he tried to do a pop rock album, he did do a pop
and succeeded. Thank you very much.
He did make a pop rock album, but it was supposed to turn into a movie, and it was supposed to launch this whole thing. Yeah. And while the album is not as bad as I remember, the VH1 behind the music is. I stand behind that. For those of you who don't know, VH1 used to do a thing called Behind the Music, where they profiled a musical artist. Sometimes it was a band, sometimes it was a person. And what they were doing is they were giving you like a behind the scenes look at, more often than not, because this is an entertainment show, it's, the dysfunctional stuff, the crazy stuff, the wild stuff. And so they tried to do that in the launch of this
for an artist that didn't really exist.
And it was so weird. And it was so radically different than the Garth Brooks persona.
Right.
Which, we always know. Yeah, of course.
Emo haircut, soul patch.
Yes.
Yeah. Flavor saver. You know what I mean?
And it fell flat, so much so that they canceled the movie and all of these other things. And it took him, he had to disappear for just a little bit before he kind of reemerged and went into what I would say his Garth Brooks, Jimmy Buffett era.
My favorite story from that is, so do you know who Todd Snider is? Mm-hmm. Todd Snider is a Nashville songwriter, and he wrote a song called All Right Guy. Garth Brooks actually asked if he could record the song, and actually invited him to show him how to play it, and he didn't end up using it. And he said a couple of weeks later, I got a check for $2,000 from Garth Brooks. And he says, that's about $2,000 more than anyone had ever given me to do for something like that. And so I was like, that's such a cool story. And he was going to use it on the Chris Gaines album and didn't end up using it. So that's my favorite story.
Well, that is fun. I've never heard that one. Before we digress too farther, so to me, I think that's kind of where we're getting ready to land the plane. That is the basics of deconstruction. Deconstruction is, the words that we say, the text that we use, whether we're talking about the U.S. Constitution or the Bible or Stephen King's The Stand.
Like, remember your lit class.
Yes.
Like, that's deconstruction and giving Frankenstein meaning, or giving Shakespeare a different meaning beyond what the traditional one-line meaning was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Understanding that, it's in a lot of ways giving the text life.
Yes.
Life in a new context. And what I want to say is, yes, it is scary. It can lead to some scary moments. It doesn't have to be something we're afraid of.
Yeah.
It can be, if we will let it, if we have some good people in our lives, if we will trust the Holy Spirit to walk with us during that process, I think some great things can come out of that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I think we can become more holistic Christians. Everybody's journey is going to look a little bit different.
Sure.
But I think there's just so much good from it. I don't think it's something we have to be afraid of.
Yeah, inherently, Christianity has always flourished when it has been counterculture. And I feel like the deconstruction has become the kind of counterculture to a point. I think sometimes that it has, but I think it's become kind of a counterculture movement to the cultural Americanized Christianity that has existed, and Christianity has always been better when it has been for things.
When,
as opposed to against everything.
When it has been for things, and better things have come, even when there is those moments of conflict where we have to decide, okay, what are we going to do about this issue? And you've got people who very, very strongly feel in ways about it.
Sure. Absolutely.
So, y'all, this has been our little primer. Next week, we're going to get into a little bit more of our personal experiences with what we're calling deconstruction. It's funny. Again, I wanted to bring Matt on. Brooke will be back next week because, we are three people who are all active in the same church right now. We're in ministry at varying levels. And we have some very different experiences of that. And some are you know what? Yeah, I guess I went through that a little bit, but, at the end of the day, it wasn't that big of a deal to this radically shifted the course of my life.
Yep.
And we just want to share those and maybe share a couple of other notable examples so that you, hopefully in somewhere in the middle of this, you'll find yourself. If not exactly, at least like, okay, kind of tangentially, I see where I'm fitting in all of this. So we hope you'll plan to come back and join us in that. I think it's going to be one. If it's two, we'll let you know. Who knows? We do this. We talk a lot. It might be we end up with some bonus content.
Just keep going. It's fine.
Well, y'all, we're so thankful that you have joined us for this episode of Consumed by Grace podcast. Normally, this is the time where Brooke and I would have a little bit of banter about where you can find us and what all not. But I'm not going to make Matt do that because
I don't really have a whole lot. Like, you can't really find me almost anywhere. If you want my number, I can give it to you. It's no, I'm not going to.
Not going to do that.
No,
but you can find the Consumed by Grace podcast anywhere you find podcast, Apple Podcast, Amazon. There are apps that I'm sure because of my age I don't know exist that are now podcast centric. Brooke would kill me if I didn't mention Spotify, so put Spotify out there as well. We're also on YouTube if you want to know what these goofy guys look like with their voices and their things.
Of that, changing over to something else.
It's funny, we were talking about this last night at a different event. We're talking about, okay, who do we want to be our front leading face? And the answer is, well, none of us. We have faces for radio and podcasting. But you can find us all the places, even on YouTube if you so desire. We hope that you enjoyed this. Give us a like. Follow the show. If this is your first time being with us, welcome. We are so glad you're here. Check out some of our previous episodes. We've really ran the gamut with some random stuff. So we hope you will join us. And if you're really enjoying us, think about sharing us with a friend. Y'all, we are so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us on Consumed by Grace. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye, guys.